No, cardiac.
Yeah, so my spouse can tell me that Protect Relief was always known.
Congratulations.
You look great. So you're not doing real estate?
Currently, I'm with commercial.
Oh, that's right. They used to have offices in World Trade Center. So nowhere near the containers. So you're like scheduling?
I'm doing contract.
So that's the company's produced
Right.
Congratulations again. It's hard to believe. It's like 26 years ago. This is I was in class. Probably that too. You probably got a 6 first grade. I have to think about it. So I saw this popped up and I got an email. I was like, oh my God, again. I'm not also, I'm not email. They said friends on campus. So I got it on Facebook. So I dumped it. I hope it's something that we're going to be in. Because I did RSVP. So I mentioned right at the front door. I said, are you going to 219? She's like, yeah, I'll just pass. I even said, you're the right? She's like, yeah. So I'll put me in. So are you yeah. Did you unsubscribe? I don't think I ever turned you off. Well, I used to always, when I was on campus, I was coming out to see if you were there. Yeah, message. I know this. No, because I was looking at your profile. Or somewhere I saw something. I think you posted this that you were part of this university. So I Googled to look. Yeah. Is it business school?
I may duck out early if it gets bored. Okay. So. Yeah. We'll have to call you up. Talk about the Mexican border project. Yeah. No, I'm going to have to duck out of here. Are you going to go the full 2 hours? No, it's an hour. Yeah, I got it.
Oh, baby. It's a lot. Congratulations. Hey.
Good afternoon. I think we should get started. My name is Jade Akari. I'm the Senior Associate Dean at the Kogod School of Business. On behalf of Dean Delaney, the faculty, staff, students, alumni, the Kogod community, it is indeed a great pleasure, honor to introduce Professor Richard Linowes. Richard joined Kogod 33 years ago in 1986 after completing his DBA from Harvard Business School and also doing a stint at Goldman Sachs. It's been 33 very quick years. He has helped to shape and lead Kogod in many different ways. It's going to be difficult for me to go through all his accomplishments, but he has served as the program director of our Masters in Sustainability program, helped greatly to shape this program, which is now an outstanding program that we offer. His contributions span across the life of the university. But when I think of Richard, I think of him as the master teacher. He inspired thousands of students as well as colleagues through his teaching. His strategy management course is fondly remembered by all alumni that I meet. So I'm just going to give a small anecdote. Just some months back, I ran into one of our alumni, Craig Strent, who was in our undergraduate program. Yes. I think he graduated about 25 years ago. And I remember Craig because he was accounting. He started off as an accounting student, and I was his accounting professor. So I expected him to say some good things about me. And he said, Professor, Craig is right there at the back. And he said to me, Professor, you were good, but Professor Linowes was outstanding. And after I took his class, I changed my major from accounting. And I knew that was not the right thing for me. And I wanted to follow my dreams. And he also shared something which was really got to me. He said that he still had some notes after 25 years, which he took in Professor Richard Linowes' class, and he still has them. So that is the kind of impact Richard had on his students. And I was just, in preparing to give this remarks today, I was just went into the LinkedIn site for Richard, and of course the testimonials from alumni and former students. It's just outstanding. And that kind of reminds us why we are in this business. We are in the business to educate. And that is the reason why Richard is the only named Kogod outstanding professor of undergraduate programs because of the deep impact that he has had. Now, of course, in scholarship also, Richard has left a big mark in his area of cross-cultural management. He's an expert on Japanese management practices. He's a sought-out presenter all over the world and even spent a sabbatical in Japan. So, but his impact in the classroom is what really stands out. So it is very humbling for me to actually introduce my colleague, Professor Richard Linowes. I know you have not come here to hear me, so I'm going to cede the floor to Richard Linowes.
This is very moving, and thank you all very much. Thank you for the people in the room. Thank you for those people who are tuning in through Facebook. And so I'm really pleased to be in touch with everyone. It's you that we're celebrating. And so I'm here to talk about some of the things I do to help make that possible. So, okay, we call this the last lecture. Some people object to that, and I guess with emeritus status, you don't necessarily have to really make it the last. But the other name that I came up with is Adventures in the Kogod Classroom. Now, considering that some people ended up marrying people who were students here, I didn't necessarily mean to have that in mind. But I think I can point to a number of people in the room who are people who brought that to bear. But what I'm going to share with you is talking about my 33 years here, but actually Iran and Parthaban both asked me to do this. And I thought, well, maybe I don't really want to do it, you know, I'm heading on out. But then I realized there are a lot of people here who don't have a sense for the history of this place. And people who've been around, including like a third of a century, probably have some rights to say some things that might be of interest to people. And so I'm going to share that with you. But I also realized that maybe I'm a special person to do this because not only did I spend 33 years here, but my mother grew up here. So I'm actually going to take you back 100 years and look at the kinds of things that have happened. And so first I'll talk a little bit about history. Then I'll talk about the kinds of contributions I try to make because I actually came here with the intention to fix the business world. And so I'll say some more things about this. I see my cousin in the back who took me to see the movie Back to School when I first became a new professor. And there we see Rodney Dangerfield trudging around trying to cope with life as back in the university. I felt a little bit like that when I came back to the university. But I felt the need to create a lot of innovations. We'll talk about that. And then I'll make some comments about the stream of students we've had the opportunity to work with over the years, some of whom are in the room here. So as I do a lot with the Japanese, I felt it was my duty to give this kind of presentation with history. And so as the Japanese would say, so my duty to do this. So first, this is what American University looked like when I came here in 1986, 33 years ago. And here's a better picture of it with the buildings marked out. So first I want to point out a couple of things. At the business school, we know from Iran's pictures that the business school and public administration used to be downtown at 19th and F, where office buildings were, and then they finally came up to over here in Hamilton Hall, and so that's where Naqshbandi got his doctorate here, so he was here at that. And the business school was in what used to be the library. So Battelle Tompkins had been converted into a business school, and so the whole batch of us, and some of us are in the room here, look at that smile on that face, on Don's face. We lived there happily for a while, and the business school replaced what was the law school in this building, and the business school took it over and actually merged it with what was a theater on campus. I'm sorry for those people who were theater arts people. This became Kogod, and I had an office over here. So this is probably analogous to people now having offices way over here. And this is where the original basketball court was for AU. No wonder why we're not in the final. And the swimming pool was there. And it was sort of like off in the way. And of course, Capsule has contributed money and replaced this. And the pitch that was made to Capsule, when you drive home up Massachusetts Avenue out to Potomac, don't you want all your friends to see Capsule's name there? So we'll say some things about this. But this is what it was like. And I'll point out there's another familiar name up here, Khashoggi Center. Of course, we've learned a better way to pronounce it now, but Mr. Khashoggi at the time pledged $8 million, and the rumor is, the legend that I heard as a young faculty member, is that he gave $1 million and then ran into some financial problems as an arms dealer in the Middle East. And so he gave his $1 million, and the president at the time, Berenson, came back to him and said, okay, what about the rest of it? He said, well, put the money in the bank and it'll grow to $8 million. So we don't call it the Khashoggi Center. Relations and building goodwill and maybe to irk the Saudi government, we could call it that again. So we might, I came from Washington, so I lived here from my birth through age 12, then my family moved to New York, but my family's been here for a long time, and all my uncles and aunts and cousins, and some of whom are in the room, we've lived here growing up, and I've been a regular part of Washington. And as a kid, I was a stamp collector, and I often was brought to National Geographic lectures. I mention this because there may be some people raising children in the area, and it's interesting, when Ted Turner took over his father's business, they were in the billboard business. And he said, I don't want to just look at these still pictures anymore. I want something that moves. So he went from the billboard business to television and started CNN and Turner Broadcasting. And so I think that that's probably analogous. I was a stamp collector, an avid stamp collector with stamps from all over the world, and the stamp album. But I not just the still pictures on the stamp, I wanted the live thing, so I became a teacher. So every time I go into a new class, I feel like I got a new selection of stamps in front of me that I'm trying to add to the collection. And then my uncle used to take me down to hear the lectures that were given in Constitution Hall, where AU used to have its commencement. And in those lectures, people would talk about their adventure travel. Those of you who grew up staring at African tribes dancing to music as a little kid, I remember loving that. To this day, National Geographic are the most cherished books I have at home. And I realized that I still love that thing. And so what I've done in recent years is write a whole series of cases that are experienced a little bit like the National Geographic lectures, where we're going and doing, looking at emerging markets and the kinds of issues that they face there. So I'm also a Civil War fan, so I should mention, I picked this date, April 12th, because this is a very significant day. This is the day when the South attacked the North in South Carolina, Fort Sumter. Do we have Civil War fans here? So even though the South Carolinians and the Tennesseans and the Kentuckians still call it the War of Northern Aggression, let's set the record straight. It was the South that opened fire on Fort Sumter. And think about that. They built that fort to protect against external enemies. The cannons were facing out to sea. They got attacked from the naval behind them, the naval of the nation. The South Carolinian people fired on Fort Sumter. And so I think that's a nice example of how strategy can run amok. Certainly fits with learning from failure and some of the other kinds of courses we try to teach here. The other thing that's very interesting is that here we see these kinds of things over and over again. And so I was very much a part of studying Civil War and how it's impacted the things we have around here. I also was very avid as a musical performer. I played guitar, played piano, played violin, played in a rock and roll band. I'll show you that in a second. And I sang in choruses for about 15 years. I've done all the major choral works in Western literature. And I think that has some impact on my classes. I don't mind getting up and being a ham. I don't mind being a little theatrical. And when we have people in the room who have musical interests, it's nice to share. The other thing I'll point out is that my family was very active in all the professions: medicine, law, business, accounting. And so that had a big influence on me, and I'll share that with you in a moment, and it will explain my zigzag career. But if we're going to say 33 years history is nice, but as long as people here might be interested in history, let's go back even further. So just imagine right now, what do you think AU was like 100 years ago? Everyone got a picture in their mind? What was AU like 100 years ago?
Chemical warfare.
Chemical warfare. The quad was filled with tents. This was Camp American University. This is exactly 100 years ago, 101 years ago, our campus. Now you might say, oh, come on, that's all history. Who cares about that? Well, I'd say half of my 33 years here, we were dealing with toxic results of that, digging up the neighborhoods in the back. So I can't think of a better precondition for a sustainability program than the fact that this university created a toxic dump and had to clean up its own toxic dump as a way of showing that they are committed to the cause of sustainability. Here's another picture. And so there we are. That's Hertz Hall back there. The soldiers were there. And here they are marching in front of Mary Braden under construction. So the troops are over here. And where we have our athletic fields, they did other things. This is what the campus looked like from the single apartment buildings there. But we call this Camp Leach, American University, Camp American University. And in fact, there was a ship that was named after the university because of the role it played in the chemical warfare of World War I. This was the seat of chemical warfare for the United States in response to the threats that we got from in Europe. And here's trench warfare down on our athletic fields. Okay, so I grew up here. My mother grew up, born in the 20s. She used to go to the original Marriott root beer stand. So she's really part of that tradition, and it was wonderful. I've been able to sort of combine that experience that she had with other things that I've done at AU, I'll mention shortly. But we used to go, she went to the root beer stand, and then when Marriott got into the hot shop business, I'd say as a young lad, probably a third of my body mass was hamburgers that came from hot shops. And she lived here during the Depression. Just to give you a feel for those of you who maybe are new to Washington, they had to put wooders up in their house. People who were probably the age of our students now, they couldn't find jobs. Very migrant force. My mother did, though, insist on going to college, even though her father thought it was silly for a woman to go to college. I'm sorry she went to GW rather than AU. But then when it came to World War II, all of a sudden, she was working in the Pentagon. And soldiers that had been there in informal dress after Pearl Harbor, all of a sudden they came in uniform. And they sat there all day long. And my mother said, with no air conditioning, just circular fans, they had to put blotters under their elbows to catch the perspiration and drip down. Imagine life back then. And you had to paint your headlights so they wouldn't be dark. So it would be dark. And you had to pull down dark shades in all your homes, so in case there was German aircraft that were coming, that they wouldn't be seen. And that was part of life then. And I remember my mother telling me that she went up to the neighbor whose son had just been killed in the Battle of the Bulge. They went to pay condolences. And the woman chased her out of the house. Why does your son get to live? Chilling. Well, her son got to live because he was a medical doctor. He was in medical school then. And sure enough, when it came to Korea, he was the first one sent out to the Chosin Reservoir. And he saw the most unbelievable disasters, like people coming in with balloons blown off, but frozen, and they get into the warm healthcare area and blood starts flowing out. He couldn't talk about it for years. To this day, he's the one who's written the manual, the Army manual, on how to deal with emergency medical care in a war zone. So I was born right around then, Eisenhower. I remember seeing the Eisenhower inaugural parade as a little boy looking out the window and seeing missiles coming down Pennsylvania Avenue. We used to do that. That's around the same time when Eisenhower started SIS to give employment to diplomats and to really teach the next generation. And then the missile crisis of the early 60s. Of course, Kennedy gave this wonderful speech here right at AU calling for a reduction in nuclear bombs. But I remember living here as a little kid, we debated whether or not we should build a bomb shelter in our backyard. We got training in elementary schools with sirens to, rather than lockdown because of shooters, we got trained to get under our desk and cover our heads in the event of a nuclear attack. I'm sure that AU had those same kind of issues. Meanwhile, all the representatives in Congress were figuring out a way to tail out to West Virginia in case there really was an attack. We decided not to build the bomb shelter. Instead, we just got a bunch of canned water that we kept in the basement. Unfortunately, it just sat there until it rusted. But that was part of life here. In fact, people who still have bomb shelters here often use them as wine cellars. And so I know a number of families like that. Oh, then there was the issue of liberating the blacks in America. And so I remember as a little kid downtown, there were white bathrooms and colored bathrooms, bus station downtown. I remember that. I know that when buses went across the river from Washington to Virginia, all the black people had to get up and go to the back of the bus. I remember that in my neighborhood, there was an empty lot, and a group of neighbors came over and tried to get the white folks in the neighborhood to buy that lot so it wouldn't go to a black family. My father kicked them out of the house. It ended up being built, and an ambassador from Central African Republic moved in there, and I remember as a little kid lighting sparklers for them on the 4th of July. So I lived through those kinds of things. And so I remember when Martin Luther King was shot and everyone went crazy, and my aunt is calling all the children into the house so they wouldn't get hurt by the things that were going on the street. And then there was the Vietnam War protests. So I was in college at the time of the Vietnam War, got a high number, didn't have to serve, but did come down and was part of some of the demonstrations down here. So those of you who know Forrest Gump and the Lincoln Memorial protest, I was there. I remember the National Guard coming in the next morning and clearing out with a haze of marijuana overhead and ground filled with beer bottles, empty beer bottles, and all the students or young people who had been down on the mall came up and crashed out in AU dorms and GW dorms in the lobby because they didn't know where else to go. So I've been here in college years for rock concerts over here, right over here by McDowell Hall. So I've seen that. The other thing I want to point out is Petra Kelly is very important because that's the second great claim we have for being the Center for Sustainability. During the anti-war movement, came here named Petra Kelly and saw political organizing on campus and thought, hey, what a great idea, let's bring that back to Europe. She created the Green Party. So not only do we have our own toxic dump, which we were compelled to bring up, but we also have we were the birthplace of the Green Party. So, okay, so then when I was, what I want to show you, here's sort of history, and here's my family's link to AU. So this is when I was born, and this is when I started at AU. And you see a lot of AU names happen a lot earlier, right? So, for example, Cy Katzen, my mother used to study with him in high school. Bob Kogod, I learned to pray in the Kogod Sanctuary, and both my mother and my father's funerals were held there in the Kogod Chapel at Addis Israel Synagogue. My parents were married at Sixth and I Synagogue. I was bar mitzvahed at Addis Israel Synagogue. I've really been part of the Washington area for a long time. I remember the building the Beltway and how they had to pick up and move houses to create room. I remember them building the Metro, where most of the city was shut down because of underground tunnel building, and how ground shooters got stuck underneath Wisconsin Avenue trying to come up here to reach the A2 area. There was too much rock in the way. There were a lot of problems here. But I learned to dance in the K Auditorium. My father's office was in the Bender building. So this is Bender Library, Katy Spiritual Center, Kogod School of Business, Katzen Art Center, the same names. They were all people active in the Washington area, and I was part of that. And my uncle himself was a zoning lawyer in Washington, in Montgomery County. He built Montgomery Mall. He was head of the Board of Trade, and he became a trustee. So my uncle was a trustee at American University. And in fact, they fixed me up with the daughter of the provost when I was working in New York. When I went back to business schools, I took my business school. These are the GMATs. I took them here at AU. So I did a lot of things here before we got into coming here. I mentioned this at the end. Marriott, my mother was part of. I grew up with all these things. The first commencement I saw down at Constitution Hall was delivered by Mr. Marriott. It was so great because last year when I did this consulting project for them, I was able to quote things I remembered from that commencement from 1986. And then the last project was right at the end of my career here. We did a project for Marriott, and the idea was, how can we take the values of service that was so demonstrated by the founder and teach this into the hotels that are now expanding across Asia. And so it's interesting, I got to revisit my whole mother's life and what that was like as part of doing things for school. These are some of the other things that my family was part of here in town, and so I felt the need to have a career that wasn't only in academia, but mixed academia with business. Here's AU in '58, and here is yours truly in '58. So this is not so far from here, and that's me as a 7-year-old. Okay, so this is what my career was. We moved to New York. Then I went to Scarsdale High School, which, by the way, is having its 100th anniversary the day before commencement here. So I'm going to go celebrate another 100 years of operation up there. But from there, I went to Princeton, where I had my own major, which looking at parallels between computers and brains. Right after I graduated, following my father's footsteps, I worked in the accounting profession for a summer, then went into an interdisciplinary computer science program at the University of Michigan. While I was there, I had a chance to go and live in Japan. With Princeton in Asia, I lived in a company dormitory inside Panasonic, sang the company song every morning, recited the company 7 principles, did the company exercises. We'd get together at the end of the day and again sing the company song and do the company exercises. And of course, then people would still say, working until like 10 o'clock at night. But it was a complete mind switch for me to really see that. And so I came back, that changed my life. You'll see some of that. And when I left Michigan, I came down here to Washington, D.C. to work for Arthur Andersen, the group that's now become Accenture. And so I worked right down on Farragut Square, 14th or 16th, 17th and K. And then I went to Harvard Business School, where I looked at how strategy gets implemented. And I felt I didn't really know much about finance. I always knew that I learned by doing. So I went to Wall Street and came in as an organizational expert inside Goldman. I really had the run of the firm. I'll say some more things about that. But some things happened to me there that changed me, and I decided to come back and become a teacher. So my intellectual evolution, for those who are more academically inclined, I started in cybernetics, parallels between computers and brains, looking at more of the mathematics of it, systems theory, then looking at organization theory, particularly looking at the contrast between American organizations and maybe Japanese organizations. And so that got me interested in cultural anthropology. And since I've been here, I've really devoted myself very heavily towards developing pedagogy. While here, I've had relationships with USAID, the Foreign Service Institute, where State Department people are trained before they go overseas for the next tour of duty. I worked with the Baldrige National Quality Award, and we're very pleased to have here today the former director of that program. Baldrige National Quality Awards really helps organizations strive to do continuous improvement and breakthrough improvement through real strong culture and real strong measures. And so I was happy to be part of that whole movement and actually taught some of this in our organization development program on campus. I've been active with the Harvard Club and then with the Milken Conference. So this is just my musical background. I had Jimi Hendrix aspirations. But, okay, so for those people who would like to talk about the research we do here, I'll be happy to talk more about this at the end. But today I'm primarily talking about the teaching setting here. But I'm happy to talk about the work that I've done with international business and with teaching innovation. So here are some quotes from my experience at Goldman that I think helps explain how I was propelled. Number one, I went there and I got to write my own job description. They realized that I was someone who might be able to take a new perspective on how the organization worked. And I said, Goldman Sachs is number one. We're not going to stay number one unless we're willing to take a fresh look at ourselves. So I came in, I wrote my job description, and I was introduced as a workflow maven to take a fresh look at things. And I'll never forget one of the first days on the job, the senior guy, the number 3 guy in the firm, came up to me and said, "We're going to get our money's worth out of you." So I like to tell it to my students there to help them appreciate there's some kind of delivery. And actually, I had previously published in Harvard Business Review some mechanisms for planning how to allocate systems in an organization. And so I was asked to do that inside Goldman. And so it really changed things. And so that same guy said at one of the big firm-wide meetings that because of the suggestions I made, some sacred cows around here will have to go off and become hamburgers. And that same guy saw that as news stories developed, maybe Bankers Trust got smashed with something, or long-term capital got hit with something. And so there was a lot of tension in the air. And so he said, we need to have a report on my desk every morning that shows the degree to which we are indebted, we are at risk, what's our exposure to every outside organization. And so it was very clear that some of the things we learned in college and graduate school about strategy and how it's made, it's so much more dynamic. It's alive. And so every week you're faced with those kinds of decisions as you check what's going on. We did completely redo the systems in the firm. And so it was described by another senior partner as trying to explain to a man running a marathon. It was intense. I loved it. I didn't love New York. I also met some characters there that were not always so savory. And so I found that I was trying to tell people, don't do that. You shouldn't do that. And the answer was, because they were a little bit older than me, shut up, kid, this is the way to get ahead. I said, this is not the way to get ahead, because the senior people have a very clear sense of ethics. Goldman Sachs business ethics, business principles are really wonderful. I give them out to my classes now. And some of you are students now, haven't seen them yet. But very important, and so I realized people older than me may not hear it, but maybe younger people will. So I decided to come here to turn out people of high integrity to the business world. Plug a hole, turn out the kind of people who, your word is golden. You make a handshake, that's solid. If you win everybody's trust, you're golden. And I knew that. A lot of people didn't know that. No one ever told them that. I was resolved I was going to do that. And I also had learned a lot from my experience and wanted to teach some of those lessons to those people. And I'd be able to say. So I came in, wanted to fix the business world and really focus on our human product. So, okay. So there were a lot of things I saw, why didn't I learn that in business school? Why didn't we teach that? So I've really come back and tried to do other things by building awareness of business and markets, creating analysis experiences in the classroom, a search, let people search for their core convictions, their personal mission, and to then give them a peak performance opportunity. And again, the last day of class, I give my lecture on it, which really reflects the training from my father, who with the American Institute of CPAs was in charge of the trial board. He used to kick people out of the accounting profession who were not ethical. And so you can imagine growing up around the dinner table with a father like that. I had that really put into my head and felt the new need to do it. So I wanted to turn out people who understand news and markets, who are well informed, who look at financial statements or look at what's happening in the world as management acting. Right? And I wanted to look at the roles of leaders and try to build interpersonal effectiveness. So let's just jump ahead here a little bit. We'll come back to some of this. So I also wanted to talk about business school as a launch pad and create a special experience, particularly in the capstone course, where people discover their sense of purpose and then gear up to take action to move in that kind of direction. So I got here in '86, ready to try to have that kind of an impact. I saw a number of interesting people here, and so well, I'll get to them in a second, but we had a dean here, Herb Striner, who was a wonderful genius guy, very down to earth, and who had a nice IBM relationship, which made there was plenty of money here. So he said, we don't need to be accredited. So he blew off accreditation, so much so that Harvard wrote a case about an American business school that decided not to become accredited. Well, it worked pretty well for a while until GW started saying to parents, well, you don't want to go to AU, they're not accredited. So we recognized we did have to join the AACSB routine, should we say? And so Herb Striner was there, but we had a fellow, Charlie Bartfeld, who grew up in Vienna, fled when the Nazis came in, at age 17, held a pistol to his head. He left, fought with the British all over North Africa, then fought with the Haganah for the creation of Israel, and then came to get a PhD. He was the guy I just under here, and together we developed some of these teaching methods that I'm going to share with you in a moment. Armand Hammer, this was a guy who was an American, very smart guy who looked Russian. The Russians approached him and asked him if he would be a spy for them. He went to the CIA and said, what should I do? They said, work for them and work for us too. So he was a double agent. He had amazing stories. So I want to share these things with you because when alums come back, they're probably still walking down the halls looking for some of these people. This is what they remember. And so Dave Martin and George Biles, these are two very distinguished people from the military. Dave Martin had been a brigadier general, and the illustrations he gave in his human resources courses were about transferring body bags. The first thing you do when you get to a battlefield is you get all the bodies off the field. So it was a colorful education. George Biles had been a captain in the Navy. His ship had been the one that had lost a nuclear missile that fell off the coast of Spain. So he came here with that kind of background. Herb Stutz was this lovely Alabama fellow. And when we talk about in loco parentis, does the university play the role of parents for students? Well, he did that, but he did it to all the Arabic fathers from the Middle East. And so he was routinely being the policeman for Saudi fathers to make sure their sons paid enough attention to schoolwork. I'm sure some people here have good stories about that. And Laura Carabell, what a character she was. She really livened up accounting, and I think the smiles and excitement we see from our accounting department probably grows out of her legacy. There are a number of people who are still here. Don Williamson, I'll never forget him coming into a faculty meeting with an American Eagle costume on, dancing around. Remember that?
No.
His wife, who at the time worked for the university, took advantage of the Reagan Revolution and sold shirts downtown, White House astrologer. So, Kent Baker, my first year here, he's already talking about his publications. We're down at, I remember standing at the Constitution Hall, my first commencement when Marriott spoke, and probably like 80 books ago, this was the publication you had coming out. Mike Mass is here, and his wife does double duty, really trying to work with the law and support for our students. Thomas Ronskowski, who I see here, is my colleague. We did for like 15 years worth of research together looking at American-Japanese differences. And then Lee Riddick, who's here in finance and continues to be a major player. In fact, let's celebrate. She also helped me get through tenure. Okay, so the point is, though, I came here and here I wanted to write changes in teaching, and the school was open to it. So Ann Farron was here. She used to sit in on my classes. We had a whole organization development group here that was tied to NTL, National Training Lab, which did different kinds of teaching methods. There was a lot of synergy across campus. So I worked with them, and we got grants for developing videos to add new richness to what we teach here. And there are multiple opportunities to create new classes. I think the greatest joy I have in life is creating new classes. So I came here, my research was teaching methods, which I'm going to talk about, and then just as background, I did a lot with US-Japan Cultural Encounter with Thomas, and then emerging market cases. This is like the business school version of National Geographic. But my main concern was graduating the stream of people who will be high integrity players in this world. So here's maybe a way of showing us. On the top line, those are the main courses I had throughout the entire time. And my first year teaching, I won the University Teaching Award. The next year, I won a Fulbright Award for teaching innovation, went to New Zealand. So that was down here. And so I was involved in the honors program, reworking the Washington semester, looking at Gen Ed's international programs. We did a lot with family business. Later on, we actually got a $1 million donation from the Cisneros family, but they wanted to be the third donation. So it never happened. The dean dropped it after that. But I worked with the OD program, and I worked with the sustainability program. And this was one of the most exciting things here. We have Ken Knight here from the Japanese Studies, part of that. We have a dual degree program with the Japanese university. It's the only time it was ever approved by the Japanese government. So we spent a couple years here, and a couple years in Japan, you get a degree from both universities. And we made that happen. It was a faculty work group that I kicked off that got that started to create this program. And my daughter, who is a senior in high school and has been admitted to American University, might be coming here to join that program. So we'll make that decision in the next week. So by the way, you can influence her during the reception. The main thing we realized is that we needed an entry course. And I threw myself into this and created Business 1.0, which is sort of a pun on the magazine Business 2.0. And it was a really fun class, and I loved having the right to do that. And what was interesting is that in those years when I taught the Business 1.0, I taught the freshmen, and then I had them a couple years later when they were seniors. So I had the bookends of their college experience, which was very satisfying. And to this day, the people who had me both times are the most fervent people that stay in touch with me. Since I came back from Japan in 2010, I've been teaching this global entrepreneurship course. And so later on, I'm going to give you a feel for the kind of mix of people that we have on campus because of that. But I was involved in these different organizations, including Washington Innovation Network. So we've got Imamura here, and ran several conferences, one on Japanese business, where the Japanese embassy gave unlimited sushi. And then several conferences working with Iran and the Center for Israel Studies, looking at entrepreneurship and business there. So what did I want to do? I wanted to bring people up to the level of a staff person at Goldman Sachs, make sure people knew how the world works, build some sensitivity to people, because I saw some people in the business world do really stupid things in managing people. I knew we could do a better job. I wanted to drive home the action of business, give a feel for what it's like to be part of an organization, help people find their own personal direction, and then give them a peak performance opportunity, and then give them my lecture on integrity. So I also I'm working with a gentleman from Panasonic, the company I had previously been with. Here I did some work with the State Department, working with some people from Indonesia, did a lot of work with this kind of stuff all the time. Here was the Japanese conference, where we had Kamdasu of the International Monetary Fund come to speak. We also had the head of Nomura come down, and then this is one of the Israel programs where we did green tech. So my real focus is finding new ways to teach And so we have, in fact, mission statements, and this is the mission statement we have for the senior course now. Do we have some people here who know this? Should we stand up and say it? Sure. Stand up. 1, 2, 3. To develop into vital contributors to the effective management of an enterprise. 1, 2, 3. Okay. That's how we begin every class. It's amazing how it brings people present. It also is amazing how much it builds a sense of collaboration and cooperation. And so even though I learned that in Japan, it can apply anywhere. So this was the freshman course, to build engaged global citizens with a passion for business. So I recognize that college can be a transformational experience. You can really change your attitude and your direction in life based on these couple of years of your institution or any institution. Why not study that and orchestrate that so that we can really have that and it's something sensible. And then I realized when I got into global entrepreneurship that all the astronauts who went around the Earth talked about how they were transformed by that experience. So in the global entrepreneurship course, we have the students go around the Earth in the way they do the reporting. We'll see some of that later. But the idea is let's be deliberate and sensible about creating the growth experiences. And so my mission was helped shaped by a Forbes article that I saw when I first became a professor here. They pointed out that so many of the leaders of Wall Street firms graduated at Wharton. Well, okay, maybe that's not a surprise to us. Now think about it from Wharton's perspective. One school has that kind of an impact. So if you do something different or unusual or special on the stream of people leaving your institution, you can shake the wider world. And so that pumped me up. And so I knew the business world needed fixing. I wanted to make sure we had better relationships. I wanted to teach what I learned from experience, which was a surprise because I hadn't learned it in business school, and then help people find their center, their personal mission, and move towards it, and have fun in class. So the capstone course. Yes, we know we want to teach general management. It's a course that pulls together everything in business. And we know that with the strides being made by academics and looking at strategy, we want to teach the basic concepts of strategy. But I had other things going on. Number one, I remember at Princeton that everybody had the senior thesis that defined who they were. It was like a step in the direction to own a piece of the world and make it theirs. And why shouldn't we have that in the business school? So if we did have that kind of thing in the business school, what would it be? So also understand the wider world, high finance, business government interactions. You know, most people have the chance to understand that the way perhaps I did by living up there. Just an example, one day I was called to do an audit of I was part of the team that did the audit of the securities we had on house inside Goldman Sachs. Well, I held a $100 million bond in my hand. The $100 million bond helped pay for nuclear power in France, Électricité de France. And so sure enough, when I became a sustainability professor here, I could say that my firm played a role in helping to finance that thing that's now part of the world. And so you saw that on a regular basis, being at the center of high finance. And so I also saw that people need to be well informed. We need some sensitivity about people and want people to take action towards the mission. So I'm just going to say a little bit about how a different way of teaching can really create some different results. I'm saying this now for the educators in the room. Now I'm going to show you what things I've included in my class that use some of these things. So one, when I was at Harvard, I guess they realized that I maybe had some talent in trying to get people to interact in new ways. So they brought me in to hear one executive education professor who was really unique at the Harvard program, where he would say something, blah, 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 and everybody would give their own answer. Blah, 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 blah. So, you know, the problem with case studies, you ask a question, one person raises their hand, they give the answer. But if you have a technique like that, everybody's giving an answer. Everybody's thinking. And so I realized, hey, we can do things like that. And so my way of doing that now is with dyads. Well, we have solos, dyads, trios. I'll just show you something. So solo, you can be uniquely responsible for something outside and bring that to class. Or you can look at your own background and interests and talents and values. Dyads, you can be a partner to someone in a case session, When I taught in Japan, I gave everyone a chance to practice their response in English before they said it out loud. Maybe give people a chance to check on their ideas, maybe to prepare the response to the larger class. And so the biggest thing here, I guess, is in the idea is that with a dyad, if you have a long-term dyad over a semester, you can really build a tight relationship. So I ask people, you know, is there a part of the world you want to learn about? Can we match you up with someone from that part of the world? Develop a relationship with them after you go to pubs and soccer games or other things for a while, then start meeting the people who do business between your country and their country. So it's a deliberate way to use the relationship. Okay, we could have trios, quads. This is very interesting. Sometimes you want somebody to be individually responsible, but you don't have time to have everybody present. So let's have them present in groups of 4. And so we do that, and then students rank their peer performance, and then we do like a celebration the next week to recognize those people who really did well. And so you can see here they're making individual presentations, and the whole class is divided up that way. I do this quite a bit. Squads, here you quick project, everybody up on the board, you've got 4 people working, count off, get up there and do a project. And so you can see that it's impromptu, it allows some very interesting interactions. Now this is something I learned from a woman in drama here. Form a circle and say, who's a Democrat? Okay, you look around, step back. Who owns a family business? Right, so within 5 minutes, you know the whole class. Within 5 minutes, you found synergies between people in class that wouldn't have come out. And it's a very simple kind of thing that we do here. Or the class, we have a class mission, you already heard that. We have class awards, best in class, literally. Our case discussions, everyone's familiar with that, but we can give feedback to speakers, and even more powerfully, we give feedback on people's interpersonal abilities. Okay, and then boards are having a shared resource. I'll show you some of these things, but I just want to let you know that I've been very deliberate. When I know that there's something that needs to be done, I segment it. Do we want to split it over time, like a textbook typically is done? Do we want to split it over people and have each person responsible for an individual part? Or do we want to separate it on the board? So there are ways to sort of break out tasks and put it into the classroom in innovative ways to make an exciting learning experience. This is a fun thing. You can always add something on top of the class. So we have a strategy course, but on top of that, we spend the first 20 minutes doing news discussions. And the next leadership talks. And then we have, as we just did, we have an organizational planning effort. We've added those roles. When I taught the freshman course, I thought it was so important that people in business understand culture. During break, there's a 10-minute break from week to week, I gave a history of Western music. And so people understood that learning that might be important for their careers. So all right. So the capstone, mainly to personalize education. So let me just show you some of the things. Now that you know that other things are possible, let's look at some. So I'm lining these up based on the probably responses that are probably coming from alums. The personal statements, the contribution statement, the exploring the questions of value and personal mission, and I call this the who the hell are you statement. What are you doing with your life? And so think about this, and what we do is it allows me to get to know them on a whole different personal level. Synergies between people because I know them at a level other than just me doing knowledge transfer. And then I have them put it into a time capsule. This is what Ajay was referring to. At the end of the semester, people who are students now don't know this yet, but your teamwork and leadership statement goes into a time capsule that you open in when you become your next level manager. So you read in your own words what makes an ideal leader. And then 10 years out, you open your contribution statement, the who the hell are you statement. So when you're swamped then with bombinos and mortgages and stress at work, you can remember the youthful idealism that percolated in you when you're early 20s. Another thing that everyone would probably talk about is that moment of glory, when they struck their stuff, when they get to be the little bird on the cuckoo clock that comes out and spins and sings. We call that the topical presentation, and I encourage people to show this, record this, and show it to whoever paid for their education. Let them know they got their money's worth. And so show whoever paid for their education. And so they have to generate general management, they have to think on their feet, but it's a peak performance. It's like climbing the obstacle wall at the end of an obstacle course. And the audience, meanwhile, gets preparation doing these. So here's just some ones that just happened this past week. You know, the people get up, we record all these things, and they can share this. So this is their moment of glory. This is what they show they do. And at one point when we were talking about trying to measure the success of a Kogod education, we actually had people look at these and look at the memos that were written. Okay, so now let me just show you what we're talking about here. Here's a board. We fill the board with news. So what is it here? It's a weekly summary of the Wall Street Journal. They put it up. They have roles. They become dual informed, if they take it seriously, biliterate, not just news and business and government issues, but financial markets. How many people the results you tune it down, right? Well, we can't do that while they're in this class here. And so the idea is that let's grow people who are dual informed, well informed, and use this. Once we have this on the board at the beginning of each class, you can use this for everything. You could talk about how the news is impacting the case we're discussing today. You could use this to talk about what's the Fed going to do and how it's going to impact these different markets. So I'll just say that this is what it looks like, and here's just a feel for how it plays out. Thanks to the people in the room whose news things I'm citing here. So this is the left side board, world news, domestic news, business news, marketing news, technology, every week. And on the right side of financial markets, stocks heard on the street, like stock tips, interest rates, currencies, and commodities. We start off every class with this on the board, and it becomes a resource for discussions in class. Very powerful. What I found here, for example, with BlackRock last year was right after he had just finished doing, each week he moved from subject to subject. He went into BlackRock. He was interviewing with Columbia people and Wharton people. He was the only one who knew what was going on in every market. He wowed them because we would do this here. Okay, leadership talks. This is where we talk about trying to motivate people, like a locker room talk. Like the Redskins are down 36-6 against the Dallas Cowboys. Right? And you're in the halftime. What are you going to say to your team? Right? So here we have a variety of issues. Here's another 2-minute motivational talks. Oops. And so you have different themes: announcing a new project, asking for better customer service, announcing a reduction of costs. But the one I really want to point out is addressing a challenging opposition. We boo the speaker. We boo the speaker. I could join them. And the idea is that, like, why would anybody put up that unless this is really their core conviction? And so it sort of connects on to talking about what is the essence of leadership. It's being able to speak up for the principles that you hold most dear. And so we do that. And so the last one, the mother one, is the extraordinary sacrifice. So what do we get out of it? No one's going to graduate here without spending some time thinking about people. We're not going to have some of the jerks I saw in New York who didn't pay enough attention to people. Everyone's going to have to spend some time with it. We're going to see the breadth of a leader's job, lots of different things you have to do, and give you a chance to reflect on your past experience. You know, people will say, oh, I once had a manager like that. And then they're practicing, they're delivering a motivational talk, and then we get to appreciate the idea of commitment. So here are quads. We do a lot of project sharing in quads. So they're making an individual presentation. It's a solo performance done in a small group, saves a lot of time. Right? And so I use it for a whole variety of different things in my classes. And then here's like a squad. You want to put something together, a short remedial thing, you get out and design a business. I find that many people that have been through all their accounting, their finance, their marketing, their IT, they don't put it all together. If you're going to run a business, you got to think about it all together. And so we do a little exercise like that. Whoops. Okay. Now this is a fun thing. You know, I found that people came to school and they didn't really have a sense for what it was to be part of an organization. So we actually give everybody a role in an organization chart. So here's a single business organization. This is a typical functional layout. Everyone, based on the student number, gets a role, and then they act through a bottoms-up planning process in class to imitate how that's done. So vice presidents meet with their middle managers. They get ideas, then they turn around and meet with the senior manager team, and then try to implement it. So this is what it looks like in class. This is just last week. And so here are the vice presidents meeting with their middle managers. at the end, the presidents pretend like they were in New York, presenting to the Wall Street community, outlining their plans for the future. So they go from Main Street inside a company to Wall Street, and imagine they're speaking to industry analysts. And so it makes very real some of these things that they may have only heard about. Now they have a raw image. So I'll just mention when I got into the Global Entrepreneurship course, I added to the board thing to imitate the kind of things that the astronauts experience by going around the world. So this is what the board looks like in that course. And so I will just paste through this now so you can see it generates a really interesting interaction. And so people really start to think of themselves as well-informed citizens who can talk intelligently about all parts of the world. And so it really does breed a global perspective. And okay. And it also builds their social confidence because they come to class prepared to talk about something, but then they share it with all these other people. And people really talk about how they really felt they got over their shyness, they got over their other insecurities by being part of this kind of thing. By the way, this picture was on the front page of the Washington Post business section several years ago. And so just in case you're wondering, we can come back to this, but this is what the board typically has. It's so here we have Snaps. Chat's biggest thing is now going into games. So it's kind of an interesting way to stay up to date. It really allows people to come across very well when they get out and do interviews and join their whatever firm they join. We try to celebrate this at the end, this cross-cultural thing. We have food at the end of the day, and there I am with a student cultural buddy. So these are some of the innovation. I talked about the board, talked about leadership talks, talked a little bit about this. We haven't shared all of these things, but I want to move ahead by saying we want to enhance our aims of education. And if we do this, then we launch them, right? So over the years, I've had some very interesting students here. About 10 to 15 members of the Bahrain royal family. I had the son of the president of Lebanon. Unfortunately, the guy who was assassinated, Hariri, but he came here for the commencement. I've had the grandson of a president of Panama, the sister of a president of Panama, the son of a president of Panama. We had a lot of these people. Honduras. I had this woman come into class one day and said, "I'm sorry I missed the first class. My father was running for president of the country." And Jordan, I've had such wonderful associations in Jordan over the years. And so, in fact, one of my current students now is the grandson of a former president of Jordan. So we have people here. We have Chinese billionaires here. If you don't know who's in your class, you miss it. All right, so at 9/11, it was quite an experience being here at 9/11 with this international mix in the room. And I remember this Palestinian student saying, "Well, it's good for the bully on the playground to get punched in the eye every once in a while." And a couple of students were like ready to go out. And so it was a very tough time, but we've had some wonderful experiences bringing students to home for banquets, like Thanksgiving. And in fact, just this past year, we had two Japanese students come. And I've never seen Japanese people, I've never seen anyone stack up desserts the way that this guy did. It must have been the great stuff my wife made, but he had a huge stack of desserts. And he said, it's an unforgettable experience of a life in America. And then we put on a conference, couple of conferences I did with Iran, we used the founder's room in the basement of SIS, and I used the walls with displays about different companies by putting little pins up on the wall. I had to get all kinds of special permission. People were stunned. You know, we had like 50 different companies portrayed on the walls just by using the idea of a board. So, okay, so this is one of the most moving things. I had a Latino guy, his mother was a nanny. He was very smart, did finance, seemed like a finance guy, got an interview with Morgan Stanley in Spanish in New York. He called his mother, told her, she burst out crying. She came here as a nanny, and her son was interviewing with Morgan Stanley in New York. And another guy came from San Antonio, came here. I had him for both Business 1.0 and 458. He went to also Morgan Stanley. He went to Japan. I saw him in Japan. He's now a senior equity guy at Morgan Stanley in New York. Latino guy. all because of American University. And then this is another good example. I love it when people do their self-assessment, realize what they want to do, and then pick a project that takes them in that direction. Not everybody does that, but it's great when they do. So there was a wonderful woman who was working for NPR downtown, and she saw they had all these podcasts there. She says, why don't you organize it like iTunes? So she wrote that up as her topical presentation. They loved it. They hired her. She's doing it. And so that's the kind of thing. Or a guy from Panama who came here and saw that dry cleaning could be dropped off at the grocery store. You don't have to go to a dry cleaner. He said, hey, what a great idea. He went back to Panama, did it. So it's nice when you see those kinds of things. I went to, I'll mention, yeah, here's, so Augusto, if you're listening from Uruguay, there's your picture. I've had the founder of JetBlue here speak. I've had the head of Medtronics here speak. I have a member of the Mars family here to speak. I had the chairman of Nomura, New York here to speak. I had the founder of Hotels.com speak. I have this Japanese woman who's created lots of arts organizations in town in the pharmaceutical business. We looked at electric cars. We looked at solar power, thermal solar. And we actually had in our Middle East conference, we had the Jordanian water minister and the Israeli water official talking to each other and making deals at our conference. It was very exciting to be part of that. And alumni. So Augusto's investment banker in Uruguay who Skyped in. So when people leave here, that's not the end. As I like to say, it's the beginning of a beautiful relationship. So here in these different cities, I've met alums. And so here I gave a presentation about quality inside Jordan. Here I was for the premier meeting of the New York Kogod Financial Club in a beautiful restaurant with a wine cellar in the basement. This, I'd say, was probably the pinnacle of my career. Being here, because here are people, 1 year out, 2 year out, 5 years out, 10 years out, 15 years out, all sitting around the table. And very satisfying as a professor to be there and to remind them of my lecture on integrity. I went to a wedding in Honduras. This guy, by the way, his father and his brothers and his sister are all AU people. So it was fun to go to the wedding. And then here's a Sudanese wedding. This guy is a very interesting guy. He was the first person from Sudan ever get sent to college. Dartmouth sent him to college. He spent his career with the World Bank. His daughter was a little bit a wild American for the Sudanese community. So he was so relieved to get her married. But he spoke at Muhammad X's funeral because Muhammad X went to jail, and this guy realized he didn't have a good, Malcolm X didn't have a good understanding of Islam. So he used to tutor him on Islam. So he gave the eulogy at Malcolm X's funeral. Interesting. So his daughter was a student here, did a great job. And this is, I guess if I had to just pick out one alum that I think should be maybe the mascot of our sustainability program. Here's a woman from Mozambique. She came here as a single mom. Personal mission was to do something for women. She went back as a banker in Mozambique. And after several years, she said, I have an idea. Too many people breathe fumes from charcoal, and creating charcoal creates horrible carbon footprint. And besides, you're cutting down the forest to make the charcoal, and people breathe the fumes, and it's bad for the families, it's bad for the kids, and can't we do something better? So she came up with the idea of taking cassava, processing it into ethanol, and having a Dutch company move to South Africa to create the stoves. She sells all over Africa. Hillary Clinton found out about her, made her in charge of the Clean Cook Stove Alliance, and here she was being celebrated here. This is with Kerry, Secretary of State, celebrating women entrepreneurs from Africa. And I've actually had her come back as a guest speaker. So now let's just sort of give you a feel for the special place that this is. What I thought would be very interesting was to walk you through where my students came from for this global entrepreneurship course for the last 25% of my career. So I'm now going to tick through a series of world maps, and you'll see where the students came from. 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013. By the way, Americans, so there were a couple that I didn't put all the stars up for Americans, but everybody else. It's 2004, 14, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, and this semester. So some of these people are in the room here. So what's my comment? We have the entire world community in our classes here. We have an opportunity to orchestrate transformational experiences, building lifelong relationships, and giving insights that will sustain them over their careers, or they'll help guide them over their careers. So that's my story. And so here's my comment. This is an amazing place, and the action's in the classroom. So, okay, that's it. Thank you very much. So what I wanted, there are a lot of other people here who can give a lot more richer pictures of some of the things that have happened over the years. Like we had a one-year master's program for a while, which SIS was thrilled by, because they figured, oh, we didn't teach them something that gets them a job. So if Kogod could give a one-year program after an SIS degree, give them a job, that would be great. And we've had experimented with all kinds of kind of master's programs. And so, I don't know if we want to have other people comment. I'll just say that I did bring some comments about my research, if anyone's interested in seeing this, and maybe I'll just show this. This is one of the things I'm most proud of. It's contrasting American values and behaviors with Japanese values and behaviors. And so I think that really what I've dedicated my life to here is trying to take things that are really complicated and that are confusing as heck and find a nice, simple way of describing it, or finding a nice, simple way of teaching it in a simulated environment of a classroom. And frankly, I think now that I'll just stop teaching, I'll finally get back to writing up some of this stuff that has been hanging on my shoulders for a long time. And teaching was all consuming. So once I stop consuming that, I can get back into doing other things. So Pathman?
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. There's a lot of food and drink, and so please stay on and socialize and have fun. But if any of you wants to, please go ahead and grab some food and come back in if you like. And if any one of you, those among you who want to say a few words about Richard, now is a good chance to come up and share. Yes, please. Any time limits? Well, I did say people could go grab food. So. I'm Riyad Naqshbandi, and I was told intentionally that I have 120 seconds to speak. Basically, I want to say three things. Number one is that since I joined Kogod, I found Richard as a good, very interesting colleague of mine who adopted me partially, and we have lots of chats and discussions. Keeping in mind that Richard and I, we come from different regions, different backgrounds, and different religions. Nevertheless, I consider him as a friend. Second, as a colleague. What is interesting about Richard, he's always willing to listen. And he is always supportive of new programs and new courses. He's one of the guys who supported me with Islamic finance. But I'm going to conclude by saying one thing, which is very interesting. Almost at least twice or three times a week, both of us, we walk from, what is it called? Terrace? Or I call it dungeon. But we walk from our offices toward the parking. I always complain about something because I can't live without complaining. and he will tell me about things. But what is interesting about Richard is that whenever we are discussing something, and we discuss politics, religion, teaching, and whatever, students sometimes, he always, when I get fed up with the American proverb, I use an Arabic one. And then this gentleman here, he would say, "Can you repeat that for me?" And I do that. And then he will take a piece of paper and try to write it down because he's going to use it some other time. That kind of interest. He is a great listener. Last but not least, whenever I go and travel, I'm from the Middle East, I'm from Syria. I go to Jeddah, Riyadh, Manama, Oman, Amman. When people ask me about where I come from in terms of educational affiliation, when I say Kogod or American University, they say, "Please say hello to Professor Linowes." Professor Linowes, you are a brother. And I love you.
You asked me to put some words about Islamic finance, so I guess you did it for me.
Surprise.
Konnichiwa. My name is Yuki Imamura. I founded Washington Innovation Network, which Richard just referred to. I came here just to be a very low-key, quiet Japanese. But as I heard him, I really could not leave this room without saying something about him. Actually, I have tens of things which I want to talk about him, but let me just limit it to a few. One, he was experienced in the developing countries issues. I was with the United Nations Development Program. I lived in Malaysia, Nigeria, Somalia, and the Caribbean. And my wife actually retired from the State Department as a director of the area studies at the Foreign Service Institute. That's a kind of indirect relationship. And third one is that he was so much involved in dual degree between AU and Jamaica. Actually, my wife was a teaching assistant for Professor Seki of Tokyo University, who initiated to develop just the degree with AU after he retired from Tokyo University and moved to Jamaica University. So there are a couple of the things which I can share with Richard. But one thing which you may know, you may not know about him, is that he knows whole words of Panasonic company song, which I want you to sing for us, for everybody, so that he can impress other people as a kind of memory of his working here with you. Would you mind? Yeah, singing that.
Okay, well, we were also going to learn the Toyota song, Professor Kenai of Japanese studies, but we haven't learned that one yet. Karuri kokoro aoreru inochi yukata ni musubu mazushita denki. And it goes on, love, truth, and a dream, onward, past on.
Thank you very much for inviting me here today. And thank you very much for meeting with you. And hope that we have a chance to come here and to talk about Japan, United States, innovation, collaboration, whatever that would be.
And tomorrow is the Japanese festival, Sakura Festival downtown in the mall, and he's running the Japan technology booth to share how Japan is doing things in conjunction with the United States.
Yeah, we only have 5 Japanese government technology and science agencies, including aerospace and innovation, plus Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, NEC, and JL Center, which operates so-called bullet train in Japan. So hope that you have the chance to come over. All right? Thank you very much.
So show me food out there. Oh, sure.
I'm Laura Keller. I manage the Center for Israel Studies, and I've worked with Richard and Iran on a couple different conferences that you heard about, the Green Technology Conference and the Water Conference. And what I want to say, which is really, to me, your hallmark, is that you make everyone around you better. You're not satisfied for just like, this will be a fine conference, but you're like, what if we got the water minister from Japan? From Jordan, and what if we had, we've got to make the place be like a trade fair so that there's information all over the walls. And so I actually produced all the things that he was talking about, and sometimes they're done in a very short time frame. And so Richard is the only other person I know that keeps my hours. And if I ever wanted someone to bounce something off with at 2 or 3 in the morning, I always knew that Richard was sitting at his computer, and we'd be like back and forth. And as I was watching you, it was kind of sort of felt light bulbs going off, and that's a tremendous gift. And that's not something that you have all the time. So I hope you'll still continue to be engaged with the Center for Israel Studies, especially on business-related things, because I think you make everyone better.
I'm Judy Spector, and I probably am one of the few people here who could say I was Petra Kelly's classmate. We were freshmen together in 1965 in SIS. We sat next to each other in Abdul Saeed's class, and I think he's still here. And I was also a student of Richard in his business strategy class in 2012.
How's it all?
Well, okay. I was what you call an alumni auditor, having graduated from AU in '68. And for years I had been taking classes in the conflict resolution program at SIS, even though I had an MBA. And I said, this is enough. 3 years of this, people are too nice. I need conflict. Where can I get it? So I walked across to Kogod and took Richard's class. And what he presented is the real deal. And it was a lot of fun. It was very meaningful. And exactly how he presented it. He has so much rich experience that he gives selflessly. I do want to say that because of Richard, I became an adjunct in the management department teaching that class, and Richard became my mentor. And for those of us who've been around for a while in business, it wasn't easy for women to get mentors. So I finally had one in 2012. Better late than never. Thank you so much, Richard.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Wheaton. I'm going to try not to be too emotional about this because this gentleman has had that effect on my life. So I'm going to start with the end. Have had an opportunity to teach around the world. I live in Sweden, Denmark. I got my master's degree from the University of from the University of Manchester when I used to live in London, UK. And through my experience, as far as him teaching me, those things I pass on to students I've worked with. I've also had an opportunity to live in Ireland as well and work with students as well. So I just want to come up here and just tell you, these are the results of what Dr. Linowes has done for me, and which I try to pass on to my students as well. So I just want to, wish you the best of luck, and thank you for all you've done for me. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
I just want to didn't have a motion to project because you brought in the whole hip hop thing.
Hello, everyone. Hi. Hi, Dr. Linowes. I'll be very brief. Hi. It's so great to see you. I'm so glad I got the email about tonight. My name is Eileen Cassidy Rivera. Back when I was at Kogod, I was Eileen Cassidy. But I just want to say to Dr. Linowes, I have tears watching you present tonight, and I now know why I went on to become the person, the woman I am today. It's because of what you taught me. And I graduated from Kogod in 1990. It was the same weekend as the Redskins one. I'll never forget it. And it was a great celebration weekend. I got my undergraduate at SIS. So when I remember taking your classes and the infusion of international business, which was the degree I got in 1990, and what I went on to do a lot, I worked with the Clinton administration, and now I'm doing something completely different. I'm doing health technology, and I absolutely love it. But I just want to say that the person that I am today is because of you. And so much of what I've gone on as a leader and as a manager and as a business executive, and the values that I have is I now know why and where I got them from. So I just want to say thank you very much. I hope to continue to be influenced by you in whatever you do next. So thank you.
So I'm, I guess, a more recent graduate than some other people. I graduated Kogod a couple years ago, and I didn't expect to want to come up here, or me and Professor Linowes, we had a connection working together, but not to anywhere the level that others here have. And I'll be the first to admit, even some of my other professors in here, I wasn't the best student in college. I wasn't as classroom focused, but now being in the working world and where I really wanted to be and my current position, it was hearing what Professor Linowes had to say today that made me realize that that is literally completely a part of me and my own personal values. And I'm even in a similar situation now with the company that I'm at, trying to make change like that. And that's what I hold dear to me. And I was also about to tear up because that was a really big moment hearing you say that. I really appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Harry Hertz. I'm former director of the Baldrige program. Richard and I have known each other over 25 years, I guess, now, and had ongoing relationships. Started in the Baldrige program, where I remember early on, I learned, I'm a chemist by training, and there I was in this business program. I could handle analysis, but I couldn't handle a lot of business concepts early on. And I think just exposure to Richard in the early days in the Baldrige program helped me with that. Our careers crossed over time. I came and lectured from time to time in his course, and he taught a course. He mentioned in the MSOD program called Strategy and Organization Analysis. I used to come in and talk about Baldrige and some of what it espouses in his class. In 2013, I retired full-time from the Baldrige program, and AU was looking for somebody to teach the Strategy and Organization Analysis course in the MSOD program. I believe it was Richard. I never really knew for sure, but I'm sure now that it was. He said, well, I have this friend who just retired as director of the Baldrige program. Why don't you bring him on? So I've been teaching the course ever since. Now Richard comes and lectures in the course for me. And I think the greatest compliment I ever had teaching maybe in my career was this last semester when in the verbatim comments that students can give in the rating. One of the students said about me that I was an awesome professor and he's like the father figure I never had. And I think I owe that all to Richard.
Hi everyone, I'm Helga Loost. I graduated AU in 1990, dating myself. And I wanted to be here just to say thank you, because aside from life experiences themselves and my mother, you taught me some really guiding principles that have stayed with me through my entire career and life. I still have my time capsule envelopes and I open them and look at them every few years, and it's a really special moment to look back on that and think about Helga back then and where I am now. You taught me things, integrity is probably the biggest one, and staying true to your values, and also to talk and be open to people, sit at the table, and to not be afraid to try things. So I tried a few things in my career. I founded and ran a national nonprofit for 14 years. I run the National Bullying Prevention Initiative for the federal government now as project director. Last year when my daughter said, "Mom, you're always talking about how upset you are with politics in Washington. You know, what can you do besides complaining about it?" So I ran for Maryland state delegate. And I didn't make it past the primary, but I'll run again. My campaign, though, had every bit of value, and I thought so much about you when I was designing it, because League of Conservation Voters and Sierra Club gave us a questionnaire, and we had to think about what policy positions we would have on 47 issues. It was S8, it's a monster. Anyway, when I finished that, I realized that climate is probably the biggest public health concern that we're all facing. And so I decided to have a low carb campaign, and all of my opponents were laughing. Low carb, low carbon. Even my business card was a 2x2, half the size of a regular business card. Minimal intentionally, because I thought if we say we care about the environment, we should be walking the walk. That's what you taught me. Thank you.
So I was one of the first students in your global entrepreneurship class, and I can attest to the fact that it's so true. We do write on the board, and I started reading The Economist because you suggested we did so for the class, and that gave me so much global knowledge. But not just that, I made so many friendships and unusual friendships with people that you would never think you would meet from different countries, different cultures, right? Religion, which is very important nowadays, right? We need to be tolerant of people's differences. And today I work for Morgan Stanley, and I do global financial crimes for them. And one of the things that I learned from you was, kind of echoing the former alumni that was here, is integrity and values. And I work hard to fight corruption and, those funds being misused in our systems today. So I always tell my colleagues, some of my analysts, oh, I had this great professor and I learned so much from him and these values were from him. And they're like, how do you know so much about the global economy or, the facts, the knowledge? I was like, well, it goes back to like 2009, 2010, Professor Richard. And I also told my husband that, and I was like, I wish you could meet this guy. I wish you could meet Professor Linowes. So one day, randomly, 3 years ago, I was at the airport and taking the shuttle to catch my flight to Vienna, making a connection to go to Marrakesh. And then in the shuttle, I look at this kind of like, Professor, and that was him. So we start catching up, and he's like, where are you going? And I know it was a spring break, so you must have been with him. And I know where you guys are going, but So he's like, what are you doing in Marrakesh? I was like, well, I'm going there for the climate change negotiations. My husband is going. Oh, who does your husband work for? Oh, he works for Toyota. So, oh, great, I worked in Japan. Let's connect. So I did. I connected the two of them, and then the two of them became buddies. And then Professor Khan was also brought into the picture. And there were a few projects. I know you drove one of the Toyota's cars, right? And you had a little fun with it. Good.
Right.
But you know, I'm happy to be here today. I'm glad I made this class. I'm happy my better half finally got to meet you. I'm a little sad that I'm not gonna make it to. Well, I'm thinking about getting my MBA here, and unfortunately, you won't be here to teach me those classes. But I know it won't be the last we hear from you, and you're a connector, and that's what kind of sets you apart from so many of the people, you know, aside from your vast knowledge on so many of the things. So thank you for, you know, all the knowledge that you shared with me during my time here at American. So thanks.
You just remind, yeah, that's great. One of the things she just reminded me of, when you think about connecting people who graduated from the school, our support staff, our administrative systems of the university doesn't do a great job of that. So who knows the people who were here 8 years ago and can connect them with the people who are here now? The faculty. So in fact, just this past week, I connected a guy from Venezuela who's in the food business, who's a student now, with a student I had 10 years ago who's from Russia, who's doing food deals all around the world. They're now doing deals. He had to leave my class early to get a phone call with them because they're doing deals to send chicken from South America to Russia. And so, you know, we need to have, I think, maybe a more systematic way of trying to make these kind of connections between current students and former students. And it probably depends on relationships. So, okay, go ahead.
We'll make this super short. We started a company in his class 9 years ago, and that company still exists. And we're incredibly grateful that you basically told us to continue with the business plan. We started a soap company of all things, so maybe in a different category. That advice, I'm just kidding. No. So it was your class where we met. It was your class where we decided that it was a business worth going into. And I wanted to let you know that as of at the end of this year, we'll be able to donate 9 million bars of soap, both around the world as well as here at home. And I don't think that would have happened without you. So on behalf of everyone and all that we're able to serve, thank you.
I'll never forget when I got the target.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one thing I'll add, we didn't make the board in terms of your number of classes, but it was the Entrepreneurship Business Plan class, which I think launched at the same time as Global Entrepreneurship. But one of the things that I think you did better than anyone was bringing in outside or local business personalities to come and talk to the class. And some of those people have been advisors and investors in the company that knew us from when we were taking a napkin sketch, creating a business plan, all the way to 10 years later.
Yeah, so actually we owe you a commission. And here's the
It's interesting that the one guy who taught this course with me, who graduated here, my first year here, started a company called Integrity Capital. And so interesting enough, he's one of the Inc. 500 companies, one of the fastest growing companies in America. He came to class, and was he one of your backers?
It could be.
No, that's
What's his name again? No, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was Mark Katz, that was the first backer.
And then also Mark Moyamura and a couple others.
Great.
Yeah.
But seriously, thank you for everything.
Sure.
And thank you.
I'd like to see you at trade shows.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Oh my gosh.
My name is Craig Strength, and next month will be 25 years since I graduated from Kogod, which is pretty shocking. Called KCBA then. We didn't have that. We changed that quite a bit. I'm sorry to Professor Adhikar that I did not become an accountant, but I never once regretted that decision. And
Even when interest
Professor,
rates went down?
what's that?
Even when interest rates?
No. And Professor Carmel exposed me to the evil empire of email in my senior year in having to go up to Mary Graydon Center to get our syllabus. That was the first time I ever used email in 1994, so thank you for that as well. But really, I just wanted to say thank you, because as I've shared with you before, coming through business school and that last class sort of pointed me in the right direction to enter business and to later start my own company. And you got me excited about business, where I wasn't that excited about it before, but your class really turned that around with the presentation and everything else. And even today, as I was watching, I learned a number of things and saw some slides that I want and some things that I could take away. At our company today, we have Kaizen committees, and they meet regularly. That absolutely came out of your teaching. Our core values block, which Jim saw yesterday at one of our events, has continuous improvement on the core values block. It sits on every single person's desk. And to this day, even though my teenage boys make fun of me, I still read the physical Wall Street Journal every single day, delivered to my home, which I started because of you in your class. So thank you so much for that.
Well, this guy worked for Clinton and said it was the most disorganized press office he's ever seen in his life.
I knew politics was not right. And I did open my contribution statements 20 years after writing them. I offered to do it in class. Professor Linowes suggested that I do it at home and then come speak in class, which was a good idea.
But those are some of the time capsules.
I still have them and reference them from time to time.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is David Goldstein. It was actually TAB when I went to school here. And I graduated in December '93. It was 26 years ago. First thing I want to say is I said I had to get up here because if I didn't come up, you'd take my A back. Because one of the things that you learn in this class is I'm completely freaked out about getting up in front of an audience. But one of the things that you learn that I didn't really overcome in that class is to get up in front of an audience. So thank you so much. When I was in your class, I remember this. So I graduated in December, but I had your class in the summer of 1993. And it was a strategic management decision. Oh, so let me preface it by saying I was an MSA, Master of Science in Accounting student at that time. The last thing I wanted was to take any management classes or anything like that. So it was a strategic management decision to take it over the summer in an abbreviated 6-week class. Well, I'm here to tell you today that was a big mistake because I met this wonderful professor, and I apologize, I know Bill DeLone was here and Don Williamson were other professors of mine at that time, which attest to the longevity of the professors at American University. But this guy was awesome, I have to say, just accolades all around. I've been schlepping my notes from all of my graduate classes because I made this humongous investment from house to house, and I periodically would purge my storage area in my house. It's like, what am I going to, I kept keeping these notes thinking, oh, we're going to come back and teach which I have, but actually different subjects than what I taught here. But the last round, I said, you know what, I can't keep these notes anymore. But as I was going through them, I got to the strategic management, and I was like, no, I can't throw these away because it brought back, so many memories. So the Wall Street workout, right? I still cable and wireless. Remember cable and wireless? We did that, that company, and then also at the beginning of the class. I mean, I had a lot of those kind of concepts in my mind, but in terms of bringing it all together, and I'm now an investment advisor. So it's, every day, I mean, nightly business report and Mad Money, and I actually stole one of your syllabuses when I was teaching syllabi, when I was teaching a class, and it went through and had all the shows that I watch listed on there. So as like everybody else, thank you so much. You're a wonderful professor.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sanjay Srikanti, and I want to thank Dr. Linowes for being a great advisor to all the MDAP fellows over the years. 10 years ago, we were connected by the Institute of International Education. Dr. Linowes helped us write a business case on our experiences with MDAP, and I'm just here to thank him. And that was one of the things that sparked my interest in the business world, and so just wanted to come here to thank you for being an advisor to well over 200, yeah, exactly. The cases in countries, Kyrgyzstan, right? That's exactly where I was. So thank you for being a great professor. I think.
Is yours the Moda textiles?
Yeah.
I use that every semester.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we have another here taking that. We just did this week.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. One of I think the hallmarks of a great professor is someone who's able to take an experience like working in Kyrgyzstan and then have you develop a perspective around it, which is so hard to do because your day-to-day in that job is just crazy. So it also taught me about how challenging it can be working in emerging markets. So as a financial advisor now, when people come to me and ask me about emerging markets, I have a little clarity on what that exactly means. It's not as maybe glamorous or glitzy as people think it is. So thank you and best of luck in your next steps.
Thank you for your work.
Yep.
Two brief things, Richard. First of all, I'm going to miss you. You were across the hall from me when I came here as a young professor. We literally could chat back and forth across the hall in that basement so many years ago. I think what we saw here, Richard, and what I and many of us have known is what a unique professor you are, not like almost anybody else here. And Ajay, I will work with you. At Kogod, we need to honor Richard in a very, very special way for his really, really significant, out of ballpark impact on students. I can't think of anybody who's had an impact like Richard on our students, and we need to work together to really honor him in this very special way. Thank you, Richard.
I promise I'm going to make this really, really brief. Professor Linowes, I know you from a class that I took. I took the Sustainability Management Capstone class with you. Being an MBA student, I had already taken a capstone class, but I was not going to graduate without taking a class with you because I basically know you from before I was a student here through one of my best friends, Daniel Arach. We had the opportunity to share moments together, not only in the classroom, but when we went to Honduras to actually Daniel's wedding, and those were fun times. You are one of those people who really inspires us to be the best that we can be, the best version of ourselves. And coming from Nicaragua, I did so much in my private company. I implemented so much of the things that I learned in the classroom, and I grew so much. Looking back at all of the documents, at all of the things that I still have from the class that I took with you, and realizing how much I have changed throughout the years. I'm pretty sure that this is the same feeling that a lot of people here share about having met you, not only as a great educator, but as a great human being, as a great example. So thank you so much, and best of luck in all of your endeavors. I'm pretty sure you're still going to do amazing things.
I have to put in a word or two. I don't know anything about AU. I did my MBA work at that other place, up University Boulevard in College Park. But all these people are talking about having known my friend Richie for 25 years. We go back to before birth. We go back 67 years. Our mothers wore the same wedding dress. Our fathers were very close. And he's one of these people. He's moral. He's ethical. He asks the right questions. He's the kind of person whose brain you want to pick and who you could stay friends with for that many years. So I just want to say that I'm glad that I'm here today. And I'm glad I got a chance to hear one lecture.
The last thing I want to say is that, yes, I presented, but the reason I want to do this is that these techniques can be used by other people. It doesn't have to be me. I just felt the need to sort of develop them. But other people can do it. And brand a school with these kind of methods. And so I look forward to doing that kind of stuff. So thank you all. I hope there's still some food out there. So thank you all for coming. And thanks those of you who are out in Facebook land. Good luck to you. I miss you all. Enjoy working.
How are you? Yeah. You look good.
Thank you.
Simon, this is going to Facebook.
Someone took my class.
I will be. I will find out. Thank you so much for doing that.